Thank you so much, Linda. I hope you can hear me all right. I have a tendency not to speak as loud as I should at things, so I'll raise your hand if I start to quiet down. But it is wonderful to be at Brookfield Academy. I have a great love for this school and all that it has accomplished, it is accomplishing. I really admire the work Linda Pryor is doing here with her center and what all the faculty and leadership of the school do. I didn't attend here. I had a cousin who did, and lots of friends. In fact, I was at a conference in Utah just a month ago, and someone there came over, and it was Bob Baird. Sure. His father was involved in the founding here, and he's retired now near Park City, Utah, or near Salt Lake City, where my father grew up, and is doing well. I wasn't sure how long I should speak and chat with Linda, and it reminded me of a story that is told about George Bernard Shaw, the English playwright who wrote Pygmalion, which became My Fair Lady. But he was asked by a women's literary group in England to come speak to them about English literature. And he asked them, how long should I speak? And they said about 8 minutes. And he said, how can I possibly say everything I know about English literature in 8 minutes? And the woman said, speak very slowly. So I will try not to go too long and have time for some conversation. I did want to, I was thinking about what I would say, and I gave Linda my topic, and kind of locked myself into being optimistic today. If I hadn't given her that topic in advance, maybe I'd give a different talk. And about a month ago, Ann Bradley, our academic director, was here in Milwaukee, and a few of you were there at her talk down at the Pfister Hotel. And when I was thinking about what I was going to say, I said to Ann when I saw her a few nights ago in Washington that I wanted to borrow her opening quote, which was from Charles Dickens. And it's one of the most famous lines in English literature, I think, from Tale of Two Cities. And I think it describes where we are today. It says, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. So I do think, there's this, glass half empty, glass half full approach you can take to the world today and to events in our country. But there's a lot that we can be very optimistic about. There was a John Stossel ABC News special many years ago called Are We Scaring Ourselves to Death? And that's very easy to do. I was just looking at this book published in 1971. It was the result of a group called the Club of Rome. Some of you may have heard of that. They gathered together to look at the world, and they issued this dire warning. And a book came out of The Limits of Growth, The Price of Progress. And it's interesting just to see on the jacket here. This was written in 1971, so that's about 50 years ago. But they're warning here that in 70 years, within 70 years, our social and economic system will collapse unless we take dramatic action. This is an example of so-called experts getting together to look at problems and come up with solutions that they really want to impose on the world to solve the problems that exist. And this has happened throughout really the history of our country. Different warnings come forth, different thinkers come forth saying we have to overturn our liberal order and replace it with some ideas that experts have come up with. And when they wrote this, of course, they were talking about overpopulation was going to destroy our world. It was a new ice age was coming at that time, not global warming. We were running out of resources. They have lots of graphs to show everything's just very dire. And very little of what they said, if anything, has come to be in the 50 years, at least, since they wrote that report. So I think if you go back in time and take the middle of the 18th century, go to 1750, I'll pick that as a turning point in human history. As I saw someone wrote once that humans have existed on this planet for about 10,000 years when they became, the human race separated itself from primates, I guess somewhere in Africa. And in those 10,000 years, this person said for about 9,750 years, basically nothing happened in the world. People, in terms of economic progress, economic advance, people lived at subsistence on $1 or $2 a day, except for very few in different societies. And you heard about the golden age of Greece and civilizations that were successful, but still, most people lived at subsistence, many were slaves. And then suddenly, about 1750, things changed dramatically. And that's where I think if you're looking at economic progress, you can have great hope for the world. Douglas North, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1993, in his speech, he said, if you think about history in the sense of a 24-hour clock that begins, at 10,000 years ago, for, extended time, people lived at subsistence. And only in the last 35 minutes of that 24-hour clock did we see this tremendous advance. We saw a population explosion. There were about 300 million people estimated to be alive at the time of Jesus Christ. And, we have about 8 billion today. And you could go, I could spend, an hour just talking about all these indicators. Life expectancy in 1900 was about 40, 45 at most. And now it's about 78. People are getting taller. Our average height, average weight are all improving. Infant mortality. Listen to this. You have a greater chance if you're born today of reaching retirement age than a child born in all previous decades did to reach their first birthday. So you have a better chance. A baby being born today is more likely to reach retirement age than a baby born in any other era had of reaching their first birthday. And that's a profound improvement in things on this planet. 150 years ago, the leading cause of death for women was childbirth. Maternal mortality has come way down. Average GDP per household has increased. Our household amenities, the time we spend doing housework, dramatically reduced. It's just a remarkable story. And you look at famines. I'm old enough to remember National Geographic showing pictures of, children with distended bellies who are dying of starvation, and great famines taking place. And the other day I looked at the 10 biggest famines in the 20th century, and most happened earlier in the century, and I think 6 or 7 of the 10 were not caused by the normal things that cause famines, like droughts. They were by political conflict. They were in the Soviet Union, brought on by the leadership of the Soviet Union, or in China, brought on by Mao. Those are the famines today. It's not the lack of water, drought, or anything like that. So the world's getting better from a standpoint of human flourishing, of prosperity, of economic advance. The U.S. today has the world's richest poor people. It's incredible if you look at the lowest quintile of Americans. They're among the richest in the world today. Unfortunately, we still have a long way to go. I think I saw recently a statistic that of the lowest 10% income in our country, only about 14% of their income comes from earnings that they accumulate. Most are government transfer payments. But we're such a rich country that we are able to do that. The other thing that, you look at so many other things that we often ignore, child labor. In 1870, the average age that someone started to work was 13. Today it's over 20. The average retirement age in 1870 was death. That's when you retired. You didn't have a retirement. In 2007, it was 62.5 was the average retirement age. The number of years in retirement, of course, went from 0 in 1870 to 16 today. 16 years in retirement. The average hours spent doing chores, as I said, has dropped dramatically. And I could go on and on. The world's become much safer. We've had everything from seatbelts, reducing car fatalities, toothpaste. I mean, people used to die of dental problems. And now dentistry and toothpaste have made our lives longer. I like to tell our students stories of people who sadly didn't have the opportunities for health care that we have today. Calvin Coolidge, President of the United States, living in the White House, access to the best health care in the country in 1920. His son, Calvin Jr., went out to play tennis with his brother on the White House tennis court, got a blister on his foot, and within a few months he died of it from sepsis because there was no treatment for that in that time. His father, the President of the United States, Henry David Thoreau's brother, 100 years earlier, cut himself shaving at the age of 30 and died from that. Imagine the world that we live in. We have a tendency to romanticize the past. In film, of course, it's romanticized. It features the wealthy usually, in the Gilded Age and all, but life was pretty miserable for most people for most of our time until something changed in the 17th and 18th century. And so I think we have to ask ourselves why, and we try to have students look at why is it that our lives improved so much after 1750? What was it that caused that hockey stick of subsistence to take off? And what was the result of it? And it goes right back to the ideas and institutions that we accept in our society, that we have in our minds. What are those ideas and institutions that lead to prosperity? And if you look at, there's some great tools for teaching this to students. The Fraser Institute in Canada, where Scott Niederjohn was recently, and the Heritage Foundation put out these indexes of economic freedom. And they look at countries all over the world. And it's clear the freest countries are the richest. The freest countries have the best environments, the cleanest environments, the highest literacy rates. In every measure, it's the freest countries that are doing the best. So there's a tie, a clear tie, it's evident to all of you, I know, between freedom and free markets and human flourishing. And yet we see surveys of young people today that are very discouraging when, 35, 40, 50% say they favor socialism over capitalism. And we have our work to do, obviously, from that. Now, if you dig down and ask them questions like, what is socialism? They don't know. Is it social media? Is it Sweden? The Swedes don't think they live in a socialist country. They do have high taxes and a generous welfare state. A lot of it's local, not top down from the federal government there. But it's really not a socialist country. And you ask students a follow-up question about, do you want to pay the taxes for this generous welfare state? They don't want to pay the taxes for it. They don't think there's a need for high taxes. They think there's such a thing as a free lunch. So we work very hard to educate students and introduce students to concepts that will help them think critically about the role of government in their society, and do it by looking at evidence, looking at economic principles. We consider economic principles to be not much different than the principles in physics. Just like if you jump off a building and gravity will lead to your death, there are certain things in economics that caution you that if you freeze a price on something, you cause the price to be too low, you'll get a shortage. And if you tax something, you'll get less of it. If you subsidize something, you'll get more of it. These are principles. But really, I think what happened in the 18th century, 17th and 18th century, to change things in our world, a lot of it had to do with a different view of human dignity, and the dignity in the person. And the fact that we're created in the image of God and that we each are entitled to human dignity led to really a revolutionary change in the world. It led to eventually the abolition of slavery in Western countries. It led to the birth of really entrepreneurship and small business and markets that could flourish. And it led Adam Smith in 1776 to write a book we call The Wealth of Nations, but the real title is An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. So suddenly in 1776, a moral philosopher in Scotland could look around and say, why do we have wealth? What are the nature and causes of the wealth of nations? Because it was something new. Subsistence wasn't the story anymore. People were starting to prosper. People were leaving these terrible conditions in agriculture and moving into the cities to work in factories, which Charles Dickens wrote about as these terrible places. But they were improvements over where these people lived before. And they went into the cities for these jobs. And Smith, pointed to the things that led to human flourishing in the 18th century. It was things such as the division of labor and specialization. It was its concepts. Smith didn't write about all these, but it's the role of prices in allocating resources, the role of profits and losses in directing resources. And entrepreneurship has transformed our world. I love the stories I could share with you, and you know some of them. I had the opportunity on Tuesday evening in New York to be at a dinner with Fred Smith, the founder of Federal Express. And what a remarkable story. Some of you may know the story. He wrote a paper when he was at Harvard about the concept behind Federal Express, and he said he got a C on it. He quickly asked, he said that was actually one of his better grades at Harvard. But on April 17th of 1973, with 389 employees and 14 aircraft, he delivered his first 186 packages that night, around to 22 different states, I think he said. And today that company has 600,000 employees. It delivers millions of packages every day to over 200 countries in the world. And he said, while he was speaking on Tuesday night, he said that we have 27 ships in the Atlantic Ocean going between the US and Europe. We have 21 in the Pacific going between the United States and Asia. We have ships going to South America and back. Over 500 airplanes, tens of thousands of trucks, delivering about 6% of our GDP, I think, on a regular basis around the world. And it's a remarkable case of entrepreneurship, something that didn't exist before. It created tremendous value, made some people very rich, employed a lot of people, and helped them prosper. And these stories are they're everywhere, of wealth being created where none existed before, and its ideas being put into action. There's a great book on the container that Malcolm McLean invented. These big containers that go on ships and then they go on the trucks. It revolutionized transport in our country. It reduced the costs of transport. It enabled it to be done. I mean, we wouldn't have survived COVID, I think, if it weren't for the container, with the shutdowns that were taking place in our ports around the country. And it was April 26th of 1956 that Malcolm McLean shipped his first container, put it on put 54, I think it was, on a ship in Port Elizabeth, New Jersey, near Newark. And the ship went to New Orleans. He got on a plane and flew down to New Orleans to meet the ship. And he became very wealthy in the process, but it just transformed our shipping and helped globalize the economy. And as Adam Smith said, it's the extension of markets, the division of labor. And to the extent the division of labor moves from just a community to a region, to a country, to the world, we're all richer for it. And international trade has played a big role in our prosperity over the years. The other thing that I think we can find hope in is the use of technology and how it's transformed our world. And we're often scared with technology. There's a great website that shares stories of new technologies and the reaction to them. I mean, there's actually a newspaper article on this website, Town Criers Endangered by Radio. I mean, it's stories, radio endangered by TV, and television is and each new technology comes with warnings, and now it's AI we're concerned about. And I'm not dismissing concerns people have about AI. I don't know enough about it. But I do, I see that technologies that came before it, we were scared of them. And they've made our lives better for the most part, most of these technologies. There are always downsides to any technology, but we're finding if it weren't for these technologies and this great improvements in productivity, we wouldn't be here this morning. We'd be lucky to send our kids to school, to be able to spend time in a room together, because we'd have to be doing chores of some kind. I mean, I think for the most part, it's the free market that's liberated women to be able to work. It used to require at least one spouse to do all the household chores. That often fell to the woman in the marriage to do that. But all the modern conveniences we have made that possible for women to excel in careers. There are plenty of things I could point to as evidence that we use with students to try to educate them about the benefits of free markets. And I think the Index of Economic Freedom is a great teaching tool. There are examples like the Korean Peninsula. We tell them, put in your Google Korean Peninsula at night and look at the satellite photos. A lot of you have seen that. Half of that peninsula is in darkness. When the lights go out at night, when the sun goes down rather, you can't read because you don't have light or electricity. The other half is prospering, flourishing, and full of light. The average, just in the time since the Korean Peninsula has been divided, the average height and weight of people in North Korea is significantly lower than the average height and weight of people in South Korea. So when you abandon freedom and you don't have human dignity, and you don't allow people to pursue their dreams, it has a major impact on the health of people. So I think that I think COVID was certainly obviously a very harmful impact on our country and the world. It reduced the extent to which poverty was being eradicated. The World Bank estimated just about 10 years ago that there would no longer be subsistence level poverty in the world by 2033. And we're moving toward that, but it's been delayed by COVID. The certainly had an impact on the U.S. government, the federal budget. We're running $2 trillion deficits, which are dangerous, and we've got to get control of spending in this country. We've got to make hard decisions in the future about what we want to spend money on as interest on the debt grows under these high interest rates that we've had. But I think what is encouraging is we know it works. The evidence is clear. When things get bad, there's always a reaction. And we're finding that the young people coming to our programs now are different than the young people that came 10 years ago. They're less, they're more serious, I think. They're a little less ideological and political in nature. They want good jobs for themselves. They want to know how they can contribute to making the world a better place. They are eager to make a difference. And it gives me a source of optimism. And I'm sure you see it in the students here at Brookfield Academy. And I think it's healthy that we're seeing a reaction out of what's happening on college campuses. Big donors who are saying no more. Until things change here, I'm not going to support this university. And I think changes are coming. And they're very much needed in higher education, as I think all of you know from what you read in the paper. I have um, an, uh, the market is, characterized by Joseph Schumpeter as creative destruction, where new technologies are constantly coming to replace old technologies. And I think people are uneasy with that kind of change. But I think the counter to that is that he's not an economist, but a writer who we work with, John Tamny, he likes to tell students, if you want to have a sense of how you're going to live in 20 years from now, go to the richest places in your city and look at how those people live. And that's how you'll be living in 20 years. And then he takes them through time, the past 100 years. In 1910, look at how the richest people were living. They had automobiles. Most people didn't. But 20 years later, they had automobiles. And it's true for all these technologies, the refrigerator, washers and dryers. When a new product comes out, people get in line, the rich people get in front because it's expensive. And they usually get the worst version of the product. You see the big brick cell phones they buy. They buy that for $8,000 when it comes out. And then within a matter of, it used to be about 20 years, but now it's more like 5 years. The technology improves, the prices go down, and 90% or more of people own that product. And he predicts, who knows if our economic progress will continue, but in 20 years, he tells young people, you'll be only flying on private jets. You won't have commercial airliners anymore. You'll live like Bill Gates, in a sense. Your life will be like that. You'll have all the great devices that he has. And that's been the case for 100 years. And the accelerated pace that new products come into the hands of everyone is just remarkable. And I tell students at orientation, I say, in my pocket, I have two of the most powerful things that have ever been developed. One is called, hope I have it here, my cell phone. More computing power than the first Apollo space mission had. I can find a map of every street in the world on this phone. I can listen to every piece of music on my playlist that I've ever wanted to see. I can, so much here that I can use. I can hail a cab that will get me safely to my destination. I have all my photos I've ever taken right here at my fingertips. Everything, any information I want. And I also have the other most powerful thing. It's called the Declaration of Independence of the U.S. Constitution. I said, this wouldn't be possible without this. It's the ideas contained in here that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the pursuit of happiness which is free enterprise. That's how people pursue happiness. Through the jobs they take, the careers they pursue, the exchanges that take place in the marketplace every day. That's their pursuit of happiness. That leads Steve Jobs to develop, along with many other people, a phone. And I don't know who created Uber, but it never fails to amaze me. But all these things are building on each other. You couldn't have Uber if someone first hadn't developed this phone, a payment method for credit cards, a GPS system. There are about 6 technologies that were needed for Uber to come along. But it was remarkable that when those technologies were available, someone put them together and created a system of relatively cheap transportation for us. And if you look at all these areas, this entrepreneurial instinct that Americans seem to have more than anyone in the world, and I think that's a function of the kind of ideas that we put into our governing system. And there are tremendous challenges, there always have been in the world. And we have to overcome those challenges. And it's up to the next generation that we're educating at Brookfield Academy and elsewhere to be the kind of leaders that will make a difference in the world. And so I love this place. I think you're those of you who are parents in the room here, thank you for sending your children here to be educated, to learn to be critical thinkers, to know there's such a thing as truth and right and wrong, and that morality is essential to a free society or it won't survive. It's built on that. Our founding fathers recognized that, and even said it very explicitly. Adams did, that our Constitution was created for a moral people, a religious people, and won't survive if we don't keep that kind of morality alive. So I applaud you for that. I think it's no reason to be pessimistic. I mean, there are obviously always challenges. There are always people who are saying, the world's coming to an end. We need the experts to fix it for us. But I much favor the bottom-up solutions. All of us working voluntarily in the marketplace can solve problems and do solve problems much more effectively than when the experts, so-called experts, try to impose them on us. So that's my message today. Young people give me hope for the future, and we continue to bring them to Washington where they can gain experience in internships. We have a great program in partnership with the Wall Street Journal, and we take young people coming out of college. We've been putting one person every year and paying their salary to work on the editorial page. They've just agreed to increase that to 3 young people, developing journalists who can make a difference in the future. 2 of our first 6 are now working at the Wall Street Journal full-time. One is on the editorial board at the Boston Globe. A young woman just started there very recently, I think has a great future ahead in journalism. And now we'll have 3 every year there. So that's a great opportunity. We're also going around the country now to college campuses to start alternative newspapers that are needed on those campuses, a voice of reason and reporting that's sensible. We've got 15 papers so far, everywhere from Notre Dame, Wake Forest, UNC, Cornell, Princeton. We're starting one at Yale, Dartmouth, that will give opportunities not only for good work being done in those papers, but to develop young journalistic talent that we can then put at places like the Wall Street Journal. We think that's really needed. We've been working on journalism in the media for 30 years. We thought 25 years ago that the internet and cable would create all these alternatives that would improve things, but it's gotten worse. I have a piece appearing in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow about the threats to journalists worldwide. It's mostly about Jimmy Lai, who's in prison in Hong Kong. Tomorrow marks 3 years he'll be in jail. Evan Gershkovitz, a journal reporter who's in prison in Russia, awaiting trial. We need to call attention to those, and that's what I hope to do through this column and what we're trying to do in other ways. But there's a lot going on. A lot of it's kind of under the radar screen, but a lot of encouraging things with what organizations and others are doing to try to improve things in this world. And there are lots of ways to do it. Thanks to technology, we can get around the media and call attention to this. It's concerning when the federal government, your government, is trying to suppress the sources of information, as they clearly did in the case of Twitter. But the truth gets out, and eventually people see the light. So thank you very much. I'd be happy to hear from you.